Hey there YouTubers, Muskrat Jim here. And these are my thoughts on The Alone Show, Season 2, the first 3 episodes. Well, Desmond, what can I say about Desmond? He arrived there with high hopes. He heard some roaring out in the distance, like bears roaring or something like that, and it kind of spooked him. Then he stepped in some bear dung, and so anyway, he said it himself that he bit off more than he could chew, and he underestimated what it was like to be out in the Pacific Northwest, in the rainforest out there, with those predators. Towards the end of his stay, he was out on the beach, and I noticed that he was sawing some driftwood with his folding saw. And for an instant there, it looked as if the saw blade had broken off. So anyway, I checked his gear list, and that saw was a Silky Big Boy 2000, and so it's a quality saw. So I really don't think that it was broken. I think it was just, it's got an interchangeable blade or something, and anyway, so I don't think it broke the saw really, but anyway, after that, he decided it was just too much, and so he tapped out, and that was after only about 6 hours. So I'm sure he's quite disappointed in himself over that. The next one to talk about would be Mary Kate. Now, I had high hopes for her. She's a mother of 2 young girls, and she wants to be a good example of a strong woman for them. And she was there for 7 days. Her first night, though, she kind of got swamped out in her shelter. Her sleeping bag got wet, so she had the foresight to bring an extra tarp, and so she used that as a floor with raised edges, just, so it's shaped something more like a boat or a tub or something, so that it would keep the rain from flowing into her sleeping quarters. But on day 7, she had an accident, and she was chopping wood, splitting kindling really with her axe, and just a quick miscalculation, and that's all it took. She was holding the stick in one hand, and she came down with the axe, and it just cut the back of her hand. Anyway, there's safer ways to do that, and but I mean, after being out in the woods for 7 days, you're tired, you haven't been eating well or whatever, so your judgment is off. It's going to be off a little bit. So anyway, unfortunately, she had to tap out then, like at day 7. But anyway, I hear that she's doing well now. So that's good. So there wasn't any like permanent nerve damage or tendon damage or anything. So that's good. The next person I want to talk about is Randy. Now, he was the youngest of the group, and has a good amount of wilderness experience, and he teaches courses and things like that too. He came to the Pacific Northwest thinking that he could hunt, because he brought a bow and 6 arrows, and he set up some traps, and there really isn't any small game there. One of his traps that he set, it was a deadfall. He had it baited. The next morning it was tripped, but of course there was nothing in the trap. So what probably happened was a larger animal probably smelled the bait and tipped it over. Like a bear would have bumped into it, and a small deadfall that's designed to kill like a mouse or something isn't going to have any kind of an effect on a bear. So anyway, he really has to start looking at fishing as an option. He does have a gill net and some hooks, so you'll have to put that into use. But the big thing about Randy is that he accidentally lost his ferro rod. It rolled into his fire pit, and then he built a fire on top of it. And ferro rods are made out of a material that will combust, and so it's gone. would have been totally dissolved or consumed, rather, by his fire. But not being outdone, he decided that he would try the bow drill. Now it's really wet there, a lot wetter than it is in Arizona where he's from, but he was able to create a fire with a bow drill. So great for him. And so he'll be in there for a bit longer anyway. He's not quitting yet. Now Justin, he's the only one that didn't bring a gill net, but he brought a hammock instead, and thought that, you know, he could possibly use the hammock as a gill net, you know, if he needed to. He hasn't set it up yet, but he did find a duck, and the duck was coming around day after day after day, and he figured that, you know, once the time came when he was hungry enough, he would kill the duck and eat it. And unfortunately, what happened is that he went out one day and he found the duck was dead. It was on the shore, but it wasn't killed by a predator because none of its feathers were scattered or anything, and it was all in one piece. So, you know, we really don't know what did the duck in. You know, like, was it a disease or what? Anyway, so for a little while he thought about, you know, possibly cooking it and eating it, but then because he's got, you know, 5 pounds of food with him already, he really didn't need any meat at that point. So he just decided to play it safe and threw the duck away. Like, it was only a few days into the competition, and he didn't want to risk, you know, having stomach problems or whatever, you know, from eating diseased meats and having to tap out because of that. So I think he did the right decision. You know, it's not like he was starving or anything, you know. Okay, so Larry got dropped off probably in one of the worst places out of all 10 of them. It's on a cliff, basically, a really steep hill, and he had to climb up the hill to try to find a place to camp, and he had a really rough time climbing that hill because a lot of the trees that are in his way are rotted, so he would step on it and he would fall through, and, you know, so he fell and cursed and swore and got a stick in his eye, and, you know, it was pretty rough going. But anyway, he's found a spot now. It's kind of in a gully, so I hope he doesn't get swamped out. But anyway, he's still cursing and swearing because he was bringing some of his timbers up the hill, like for a shelter, because he built it in one place and now he wants to build it in another place. And anyway, as he was climbing up the hill, he slipped and fell and almost broke his collarbone. So, you know, more cursing and swearing and, you know, Larry. But anyway, if he can just not have accidents, he can probably stay for a while. Now, Mike is the other guy that's nearly my age. He's 55, I believe. And anyway, he's got a lot of childhood demons that he's got to deal with. Now, with the help of his wife, he's been able to live a fairly normal life, and so she's, you know, supports him quite a bit in that regard. Now, here he's missing her really bad because he does rely on his wife so much for that support. And anyway, so I'm hoping that he's able to, you know, do this without her, basically. Anyway, so yeah, I wish him a lot of luck. Oh yeah, right, the other thing. The thing about Mike is that he had set up his gill net and caught too many fish, more fish than he needed for the one day. So what he thought he would do is he thought he would bury some of his fish in the wet ground as a sort of a primitive refrigerator. I think if it had been me and I had too many fish, I think I would have tried to smoke the stuff, slice it up thin, and hang it over a rack over a smoky fire. And anyway, it wouldn't preserve for a long time, but I mean, you know, it would be preserved enough for like the next day or the day after that or the day after that. Anyway, so I am hoping that he goes far. Being one of the older guys there, you know, I'd like to see him get pretty far. Now David, he's the Christian of the group, and he doesn't have a wife at home, so he's fairly independent, I would say. And anyway, he was able to catch a really nice fish in one of the episodes there. I think it was the second episode. And so he's eating well, or had, eating well enough. Anyway, he's, I think, he's doing pretty well right now. Now Nicole seems to be right in her element. When she was dropped off on the beach, she was saying, "Oh my God, I'm alone," and she was like all giddy about it. And anyway, she, made her shelter, and she's quite knowledgeable in edible plants and medicinal plants in the Pacific Northwest. So she's got that going for her, and so she'll be, well fed as far as I know. And if she has any problems, she'll be able to remedy them, headaches or whatever. And anyway, so I think she'll be doing well. Now, in the third episode, she heard this roaring sound coming from, across the river, and it was the same type of roaring sound that Desmond had heard that had spooked him out. And Nicole, the first thing she said was, "It sounds like two Sasquatches having sex," and it did sound kind of, funny. It didn't really sound like a bear, but it, it almost sounded like two bears fighting or something. But how often does that happen? So I think Nicole's going to do really well there, and I look forward to seeing her progress through the weeks. Now Tracy, like Mike, has some demons to contend with. She feels a lot of guilt because of things that went on in her past. I'm hoping that she can deal with those things. She set up her gill net, and that was on day 6, I guess. She set up her gill net, and she was able to catch a fish and a crab. And so she ate those, and like she said, it's only like about 100 calories, but 100 calories feels good when you haven't had much else. Yeah, she's definitely a tough old broad, and I mean that in the best possible way. She doesn't seem to be afraid of the bears, and one of the things I did notice is that she has a flare, a headlamp, and an air horn. Now, none of those things were in her 10 items to choose, so I don't know if that means that everyone's got those items or what, but she was able to use the air horn and the flare to shoo the bears off from her campsite one night. Anyway, I don't know if she's got any more flares, but time will tell, and we'll see what else she can dig out of her bag of tricks. Oh yeah, on the first episode, she came across this mussel bed, like these rocks just all covered with mussels. And she said that they were told by the producers that there had been a red tide, which is a toxic algae bloom. And what happens is that the meat in bivalves, like clams, oysters, and mussels, becomes tainted with these toxins. And it's a neurological toxin, so if you were to eat it, it can make you really sick, really quick, and it affects your nervous system. So, she said she loves mussels, but obviously she can't eat them. Now, I did a little bit of research on red tide and the toxins, and apparently it only affects bivalves, which are, mollusks that have 2 shells, like oysters, clams, and mussels. But it won't affect limpets and snails. So you could still eat those even if there was a red tide in the area. And we finally got to see Jose in the 3rd episode. So it's got to mean to the producers that they had to fill the episodes with the people that were, tapping out early and that sort of thing. So anyway, I've got really high hopes for Jose. He's the only Canadian in the group. Well, he's Spanish, but he lives in the Yukon, so now he's a Canadian. So being Canadian myself, I really have to vote for the guy. But I do like his style. He has a calm, humble demeanor, and I don't know what it would take to get him excited, really. But anyway, he's the type of guy that, I wouldn't mind hanging out with, because, I'm kind of that kind of a guy too, calm, and, well, if you've seen my videos, you know what I'm like. So during the seventh day or thereabouts, he made this hollowed out stick, and the purpose of it was to help feed his fire, so he could use it like a bellows, basically, to blow on the embers to make them burst into flames again. And one of the side functions of this hollowed out tube is that he can use it as a didgeridoo, one of those Australian Aborigine musical instruments. So anyway, on the third episode, he was there sounding like an Australian, even though, he's a Spaniard. I really think he's going to do well on the show, and not because he's Canadian. It's like he feels at home in the woods, and you can tell that just by watching him and listening to him. Not like Larry, like Larry is constantly swearing and fighting, and, he's, Larry would tell you that he had a fine time or whatever, but, I think that, I really think that he's having it rough. So accidents can happen to anyone, and they happen in a split second. It only takes a moment to change your fate. So I'm looking forward to watch the rest of the series. So until next time, be safe. This is Muskrat Jim, signing out. For more muskrat survival videos, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe.